So item number 4 on this agenda will be presented by Anna Bennis from the Nature Conservatory in Arizona. This item is on the agenda for information discussion. Anna, the floor is yours. I'm very grateful that you are here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled. Can you enable me sharing my screen? And or if someone has my presentation and they want to show it, that would work too.
Give us just 1 second, Anna. Thank you. Tyler, are you able to help us with this? Anna, you are now the co-host. Thank you.
It's still telling me that sharing is disabled. Oh, here we go. Actually, it just took a second. Okay. Are you all seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you all for having me here today. I hope the information I'm sharing will be useful to you in your work. I'll start by just introducing myself. I'm Anna, the Healthy Cities Program Director for the Nature Conservancy in Arizona. I joined about 2.5 years ago, and my background is primarily in sustainability. I've worked in that space in the Valley for about the past decade, including in academia, some philanthropy, and some work at a municipal level. And I have a master's in sustainability solutions. So before I get into the study itself, I'll also just say a few words about the Nature Conservancy for those of you who may not be familiar with our work in cities. A lot of people know TNC as a conservation organization, and historically, much of our work has focused on protecting pristine areas. We are the largest conservation organization in the world, operating in all 50 states and in 72 countries. Our Healthy Cities program, which is where this economic assessment falls in our work, started 6 years ago. So this is a relatively new but important area of work for us. We just recognized that the world is rapidly urbanizing, and we know that already more than 80% of the population in the US lives in cities, and that a lot of our most critical problems are in cities. And so we're really trying to address some of those challenges by actually bringing nature into cities. And our work in cities looks different depending on the local context, but certainly in Phoenix, a big focus has been on extreme heat. So I will go to the next slide here. There we go. So just talking for a moment about that issue of heat. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You all may be familiar with this, but heat is the leading weather-related cause of death in the US, and the highest rates nationally are found in Arizona. We know that the Phoenix metro area is the hottest large metro area in the US. And so in our work, we're really looking at how we can lead the way on addressing this challenge with our partners. We know that the impacts of heat will worsen over time, but it's already having major consequences. For example, in 2021, there were 339 heat-associated deaths in Maricopa County alone, with the county's latest numbers, I believe. But heat is different than other natural disasters. You don't necessarily see it when you look out the window. And so in some ways, it can be that kind of invisible natural disaster. And yet it's this slow-moving and persistent threat that we have to deal with. Oops, I'll go back one here. And while heat affects everyone, it doesn't affect everyone in quite the same way. As you can see in these maps of the Phoenix metro area, the hottest areas also have the lowest tree canopy cover and the highest percent of child poverty. It's kind of a red L shape on this first map. The darker red is land surface temperature. And if you track that L, the lighter green is lower tree canopy, and the darker blue here is child poverty. Just to illustrate the equity point further, we know that on some days, there's neighborhoods as little as 2 miles apart that can have a 13-degree difference in air temperature in Phoenix. So definitely some big disparities when it comes to this challenge. But the good news is that we know there's things that we can do to reduce heat. And so this project, the economic assessment of heat in the Phoenix metro area, we started it about a year ago to better understand the extent of the impacts in monetary terms of urban heat, as well as the costs and benefits of some solutions, and hopefully make the economic case to incorporate and invest in the use of solutions for addressing this issue. And so the goal with the assessment is really we'd like to mobilize people, people from the government, private sector, communities, and make them aware that number one, there is this problem. Number 2, there's things that can be done. And number 3, if we do not do something, there will be consequences. And so a few details about how we approach the project. We contracted ACOM to carry out the assessment. It's a consulting firm, and also convened an advisory committee comprised of key stakeholders and leaders in our community. And so those individuals played a critical role in steering this effort and also identified existing data and data resources and reviewed the findings. And so none of this would have been possible without their guidance, their time, and their commitment to the project. So really fortunate. I have some of their logos represented here, and here's some of their names. I'm certainly happy to share this presentation if you'd like to look at it later. I'm going to move forward though. Before I get into some of the numbers, I'll provide some background on some of the information to describe how we conducted the study. So we followed 3 key steps. The first was to conduct a conditions analysis to understand how temperature would change in the Phoenix metro area in the future. And we looked at what the cost would be to the Phoenix metro area if no action is taken to address these warming temperatures, looking at 2 future time horizons, 2030 and 2050. And then lastly, what can we do about this? What solutions are out there and what are their cost effectiveness? And our full technical report is available on the Healthy Cities Program webpage, which has the full supporting details and methodologies. I think a link should have been shared with you. I'm happy to do so if it hasn't. But today I'll just give you a few of the high level findings in the coming slides. And one more thing before we dig into the findings, I just want to say that it's important to get an understanding of the underlying concepts that this study is based on. So most of the economic methodologies that we applied use a baseline climate or typical climate conditions as a reference point to understand how the impacts of climate will change more with heat. These baseline conditions are dependent on the period between 1986 and 2005. And then we look at 2 future time horizons to understand how higher temperatures will affect the economy. Also note that these numbers provide a snapshot of the cost in an average year, not an extreme or atypical year. And also we're presenting 2 emission scenarios, one in which emissions are reduced and another higher emission scenario. And then lastly, our report does not project economic conditions or change in population. We're basing it off of current conditions, but that being said, we do have a section where we look at how demographics will change in the region in the future. And so I'll touch briefly on that right now. So Maricopa County has grown dramatically in the last few decades, as I'm sure you all have noticed. Going forward, this is projected to continue. The county is expected to grow to 6.2 million people by 2050, which is a growth rate of more than double that of the average US population growth over that same period. In addition, if you look right here, you can see that the population is expected to age. So between 2020 and 2050, the share of Maricopa County population over 65 is expected to increase from 15% to 23% in 2050. That means that the ratio of Maricopa County working age population to non-working population is going to decrease, which will require municipalities to fund increasing infrastructure, climate adaptation, and social service costs from a smaller relative base of market income. And so this is really the backdrop for that warming climate. And then looking to the future, we found that the average annual number of days over 110 degrees are anticipated to be between 3 to 5 times what they are now in 2030 and 2050. And overall, the annual mean temperatures are also expected to increase with an average of 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit and 4.9 degrees Fahrenheit relative to baseline conditions. And so what does this mean in terms of costs to society if we don't take any action to mitigate this warming? So the decision of what to cost out for this study was based on a process guided by the input of the advisory committee that I talked about earlier, and was based on relevance to the region and also data availability and feasibility for evaluation. The 4 areas that we looked at for costing the inaction are listed here: health, labor productivity, roadway infrastructure, and electricity demand. So for health, we looked at mortality and morbidity. The former evaluates heat-related deaths that are either directly heat-related or deaths triggered by extreme heat, while morbidity captures non-life-threatening health impacts that require medical attention. And these impacts are either directly heat-related or triggered by extreme heat as well. And we look specifically at emergency department visits and inpatient hospitalizations. And in addition to health impacts and the loss of life, heat-related mortality and morbidity create a number of costs to society. These include the direct cost of patients and the cost of providing care. These also include indirect losses in the form of productivity loss. In a baseline year, we estimate heat-related mortality impacts at $1.3 billion, Under future conditions in an average year around 2030, that could increase by $846 million, and around 2050, that could increase by $1.5 billion. For morbidity impacts for emergency department visits, we costed the cost to patients. In a baseline year, the cost of patients are estimated at $2 million. In the future, that annual cost could rise by $700,000 in 2030 and $1.2 million in 2050. And then the last health-related impact we costed was inpatient hospitalizations, where we looked at the cost to patients in an average baseline year. And these are estimated at $5.3 million. And in the future, that annual cost in an average year could rise by $2.6 million in 2030 and $4.7 million in 2050. For labor productivity, extreme heat can pose additional direct costs to businesses in the form of declining labor productivity. We specifically looked at how exposure to high heat can result in loss to gross regional product. GRP is a similar measure to GDP, gross domestic product. It's a metric that measures the size of a region's economy. For reference, the GRP for Maricopa County is just over $260 billion. And there's certain jobs that are more at risk to losses in labor productivity. And so we were able to specifically look at these high risk jobs. In Maricopa County, about 20% of jobs are classified as high risk in terms of their exposure to heat and the impact that that has on their labor productivity. And so for the results for labor productivity, we found that in a future year in 2030, the loss to GRP could be around $731 million. And in 2050, the loss to GRP could be around $1.2 billion, which is equivalent to about 0.4% of Maricopa County's GRP. Our next economic indicator is cost to roadway infrastructure. Roadways are especially vulnerable to the impacts of extreme heat, and these vulnerabilities are exacerbated by traffic volumes, which are likely going to increase as the local population grows. Longer periods of extreme heat are expected to compromise pavement integrity by softening the asphalt and increasing pavement deformation or rutting from traffic use. And gradually, these impacts become more significant over the roadway's 20 to 30-year life cycle, leading to more maintenance costs. By 2030, roadway maintenance costs could increase in Maricopa County by $640,000 per year and more substantially by $7.6 million per year by 2050. And an important note, our analysis estimated the impacts of increasing temperatures on the total roadway life cycle cost, which is the cost to maintain the roadways during their 20 to 30 years of expected useful life. And the numbers represented here are an average year within that life cycle. Our last economic indicator is electricity demand. Between now and 2050, climate-driven increases in ambient temperature are expected to increase demand for electricity use. In Maricopa County, we can expect summer energy costs to increase by $64 for residential customers and $206 for commercial customers once the average summer temperature increases by 1 degree Fahrenheit. An important note, the $64 and $206 increase is over the entire summer period, which for this study, we're counting as May through October. Another note is that this study estimates that the average summer temperatures will increase by 1 to 3 degrees by 2030 and up to 3 to 8 degrees by 2050, which suggests that there is potential for average summer electricity bills to increase even more than we've stated here if local electricity providers do not adapt and expand their capacity and pricing to adapt to changing conditions. And so now, so that was a lot. Stepping back, we're going to look at all these costs collectively, and we estimate that projected temperatures could cost the Phoenix metro area up to $1.9 billion in a low emission scenario in a typical year by 2050. And if emissions are not curbed in the coming decades, then this number could climb to $2.3 billion by 2050. So $2.3 billion in annual cost is not a small sum of money for any area. So what actions can we take now to mitigate the impacts of heat? There's a lot that can be done to manage and mitigate heat. Many of them are listed here on this slide, but our study looked at just 2. For the purpose of this study, the project team and the advisory committee decided to focus our analysis on the economic benefits of cool roofs and urban tree canopy. Specifically, we analyzed the costs and benefits of deploying cool roofs on all Phoenix metro area buildings. This would only be when they needed to be replaced anyway. And then increasing the urban tree canopy to 25%. As I mentioned earlier, we selected the 2 solutions for a few reasons. 1, across the board, researchers agree that these solutions do provide heat mitigation benefits. 2, these benefits intersect with the costed metrics that we discussed in the first part of the presentation. And then 3, there was existing research and data on these solutions based on the Phoenix metro area. So we had that really high quality local data. So to quantify the benefits of cool roofs and urban tree canopy, we first had to understand the specific benefits in each and how these intersect with the economic indicators we costed. The primary benefit of both solutions that we looked at is that they have a cooling impact on temperature. This global cooling effect, as we call it, has a direct relationship with each of the economic indicators. Another benefit, which is similar to the global cooling effect, is called a site-specific benefit, and is that shade from trees and the reflection from cool roofs reduce the demand for electricity by reducing the need for internal air conditioning. I do want to mention there's certainly other benefits that this study does not look at, but that are also important. I have some listed here. So it's probably really a conservative number when we're looking at the numbers I'm going to talk about. So the first solution, cool roofs, have the potential to reduce near surface temperature and reduce energy use for interior cooling by reflecting sunlight and thus absorbing less heat. If the Phoenix metro area were to deploy cool roofs on all of its buildings, we found that there would be $8 billion in avoided damages. Meanwhile, deploying cool roofs would cost the Phoenix metro area just $1.5 billion. And this means that the cool roof benefits outweigh the cost by 5.2. Urban trees and urban tree canopy provide shade and transpire water, which has the effect of reducing urban surface and air temperature, and thus improving thermal comfort and reducing energy demand for interior cooling. And we estimated that the impact of increasing the Phoenix metro area's tree canopy to 25% would lead to avoided heat-related damages valued at over $15 billion. Meanwhile, reaching a 25% tree canopy would cost the Phoenix metro area just $4 billion. And this means that the urban tree canopy benefits outweigh the cost by 3.8. So really the scope of this study is really just to answer those questions around what is the cost of not taking action and what the costs and benefits of solutions are. We didn't go a step further to say, what are the policy instruments you would need to really increase adoption of these solutions, but I would love to have conversation with anyone in this room and kind of think through that with you all. Open to any questions. I don't know if we can do that at this point since I don't know if we've reached quorum, but that is the end of my presentation.
Well, that was fantastic, and I like the way they laid out the cost-benefit analysis. Right, that's a big discussion point, especially if we're trying to create policy or resolution around fixing this problem. We talk about that here in Chandler on a regular basis on what we can do about the heat island effect, right? Things like that. And then when you take the urban factor, I'd be interested to hear from the team here what their thoughts are. Kelly, if that's okay. Or do we have quorum yet?
Unfortunately, Chair, we are one shy of quorum, but that does not keep us from being able to have conversation.
Super. I'll open to the floor and let's have a discussion about this.
Hi, this is Councilwoman Betty Janik from Scottsdale. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. We in Scottsdale are trying to add to all the new construction what you have been talking about, especially the urban tree canopy. We haven't even begun to attack cool roofs, but one of the objections is that it costs more to do all of this. So construction ends up costing more. And of course, the developers aren't too pleased with that. And my question would be, when you gave me these numbers, you were talking in terms of energy consumption. Have you done any studies in terms of cost for new construction or cost for replacements, and how soon that cost benefit in an average home or an average, apartment building, that cost would be recouped by the savings in energy?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the challenges here is like this study, when I'm talking about the costs and benefits, a lot of these are costs to society or benefits to society. So even though overall money being spent is less than you would have spent otherwise, it's challenging when you go down to the scale of a particular project, because it might not always be, it's going to be different depending. We didn't go down to that level, but I would imagine it's going to look different just from the perspective of a developer. One of the things that we want to look at in the coming months and years is, are there innovative cost sharing agreements where we could look at who's saving money? Maybe there's incentives that can be developed because we're understanding that we're going to save money through our health department, or I'm just throwing out an example there. But I think there's creative financial tools we could think about so that it can make sense for those individual projects to kind of opt in for that, given the savings that our communities as a whole would be able to achieve if that was the case. So it's a challenge. Obviously, if it was just the perfect answer, we would all be doing it already, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, it's a great point. Did that answer your question?
It did. And do you anticipate that you'll be working on some of those aspects in the future to get some data that we can use?
Yeah, certainly. So our board, the Nature Conservancy in Arizona, approved a kind of expansion of our Healthy Cities program. So we're going to be able to do more work like this moving forward. Love to maybe talk to some of you and get your thinking on, what are the real questions that we could help answer and being able to move this forward. We really try to be a partner with municipalities, stakeholders in this area, and think about what are the gaps that we can fill in terms of moving these things forward. So we are going to be doing more, and we are going to be taking, this was kind of a first step. This was our first time doing a study like this, but I think it brings up more questions than answers almost.
Well, thank you very much. Really, really good information. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chair, Councilmember Navarro has his hand raised.
Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the discussion. I just wanted to kind of on the same path, or how is the Arizona League, are we bringing these issues to the Arizona League and then also to the National League to statewide and federally be able to advocate for some money that would help support those entities? Because just as the councilwoman has stated, developers, we're constantly trying to fight with them on, hey, can you do some more sustainability within your project? And the cost is the thing that cripples it, in terms of the financing and stuff. But we try to get them at least like solar ready, something so that when it's time to go down that road, their infrastructure is already installed, so where the cost has dropped a lot lower. But I'm just wondering if, obviously for our state, absolutely, I think that, we need to start advocating on those incentives from the federal level and what the state can do to try to help offset those costs for those new developments, or even for the existing developments. I could say internally for the cities, we're trying to redo our facilities, and obviously we're trying to do our best on making it more sustainable. So just a thought on when we can do, or how we can get that going, or how can we lobby for that. I know that collectively with our own lobbyists within the cities, I think that with the league support, I think that'd be something good to even push up to the National League. So just a thought.
That's a fantastic idea, Joel, and I love the phrase "get solar ready." That can certainly make a difference in a big way across the valley. And Arizona, if we were to lead something through the ALC and then eventually the NLC, Arizona could be the tip of the spear as it relates to creating some cooling effect, and that'd be a great idea. Kelly, what can we do regarding that? How can we elevate that conversation at the NLC, or excuse me, the ALC? Or is it something that we could create a resolution around this meeting for our next meeting to vote on? What are your thoughts?
We certainly could work on that, Chair.
Vice Chair Duff, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, and I had a couple of additional comments, if it's appropriate right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've been pushing on my city is to adopt some of this in their development goals, to have 25%, I'm calling it shade, maybe it needs to be tree, within landscaping and elements of design to provide the shade, because even it might be just a structure, it still reduces, not to the benefit of trees, I don't want to take that away, but it still reduces the ambient temperature. And then also putting it into our climate action plan for our community, so that maybe neighborhoods or even just a single residents will look at their property and say, do I have 25% shade, tree canopy on my property, and what can I do to enhance that? Because I had been I've been working with the Nature Conservancy in various roles over the years, but I understood that if you could get a neighborhood area to commit to getting that 25% shade or tree canopy, you can reduce the temperature 5 degrees in that neighborhood. And I heard you say 13 degrees could be a thing, but 5 degrees, when we're talking about today, I'll take it. 5 degrees is huge. And that might be an incentive for just residents to take it upon themselves. Of course, we don't want to regulate anything existing, but for new development, I'm just wondering if other cities are making any, nationally, and that's where we can talk to NLC and suggested ways to achieve or implement these things in our ordinances for development. And then I think we could also create more of a talk about the economic benefit of having shade and tree canopies. I know in a retail environment, certainly, absolutely. When you have that environment, people want to be there. They want to be, it makes it more walkable and desirable, as connecting, things like that. And we could advocate it more from the economic benefit. Yes, there is a cost to install these, but there's a huge ROI on this, and not only in the health wise, but in the economic. Thank you.
Great
Chair and-
feedback. Thank you.
Chair and Vice Chair, may I add something to that? That
Absolutely.
maybe Anna can also add to. As a City of Mesa resident and an SRP customer, we're also eligible for the SRP tree program. And so if you want to add free native trees to your property line, they have to be planted in a certain space, et cetera. We've thought long and hard about that. More importantly, though, I think it goes back to the conversation about equity. There's a reason why individuals who are living in rental properties or living in our lower income communities do not have the same green. And it's because even if you do have those SRP or another free tree program, you're still responsible for maintaining them. And it can be very expensive. And so I think the larger conversation we also need to be talking about is how do we make this equitable for folks who may not have the extra money to water a tree or may not have the extra money for landscaping, but still are living in some of the hottest areas of our community.
Yeah, if I could respond to that, Kelly. Yeah, I think it's a great point, and something that we really look at for our Healthy Cities program is how can we really promote increasing tree canopy cover in these underserved communities that are being impacted first and worst by the impacts of heat. We see that the places that are the hottest with the lowest canopy, like I mentioned in my presentation, have a higher percent of poverty. And a piece of that is they're more dependent on public transit. So these are individuals who are spending time going from their house, going to a bus stop. So I love the term that, I don't know if Phoenix started it, but the cool corridor idea of, ensuring that there's adequate shade from where people live and are going to transit in places with that high, bus ridership, public transit ridership, because I think that's where you're also seeing a lot of these costs in terms of people working in jobs that are outdoors or, resulting in heat deaths from waiting at the bus stop and that sort of thing. So it's also kind of like, getting the biggest bang from your buck in terms of avoided losses. I mean, it also makes sense to really look at those communities. And that's also a good point that you made, Jen, about trees are one piece. Certainly us at the Nature Conservancy, I'm talking about trees, we're a conservation organization, but totally recognize it's part of the overall kind of strategy to mitigate heat. Trees don't make sense everywhere. Certainly canopy, built structures are also super important. And another piece, I didn't mention in this presentation, but something we're also going to be doing more work on is how can we do this in a way that doesn't have a negative impact on our water supply. So looking at the use of green stormwater infrastructure and making that easier for, talking about developers, making it easier for them to be able to get those kinds of projects approved. I know there's some challenges if you want to do green stormwater infrastructure in the right of way, but some of that can really help to, long-term keep these tree planting projects healthy and lasting and not using a bunch of drinking water to water them. It'd be great if we could make use of rain here. I know it's sparse, but we got to use it when it does actually fall. Because right now it with our separated sewer system, it's directed outside of our communities, and then we lose that resource. So we're also kind of thinking about that. Just wanted to add that piece, but yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I think we have a couple hands up. Kelly, I didn't catch in the order that they came up. Maybe we'll go to Betty. Betty, did you have a comment or a question?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. I did have a comment. What we have done is Scottsdale has partnered with ASU in a grant program, and ASU has mapped out the temperatures of various parts of our city. And of course, the southern part of the city, which is the older part, has fewer trees and is hotter. And so we're going to be working with ASU to figure out a plan to get more trees in the southern part of the city. It will be difficult because it's way more compact, but working with them, I think we can make a difference in making the southern part of Scottsdale more comfortable. So these plans are in the works, and hopefully, I believe this is a model for other cities. And once we come up with a solution and it works, we can share it along the way. Thank you.
That's great news. That's great. We would be delighted to see that when that is complete. I think everybody would love to get a bite of that apple. Joel, I thought I saw your hand up earlier, but maybe we covered that question.
Yeah, it was kind of relating to the water stuff. I think there is a conversation about water usage, and maybe it's a storyline. And when we're talking about the amount of water during our using for our farms and how that drastically takes a ton of water versus the city and what we're doing in terms of growth. I just think there's a conversation behind that. Because when we talk about more tree canopy, I do get some people, well, what about the water usage? We're in a drought. And I'm like, yeah, we are. So it's a type of tree possibly. It's also, even with the city of Tempe and working with ASU, we're also trying to figure out trees that actually absorb more carbon through the air. So what are those trees also to have a dual effect of shade and benefit for our public? But I think at the same time, our cities are trying to look attractive. We're trying to put certain trees. I know that I'm the big advocate for Mill Avenue to not take away the ficus on Mill, and have to fight that all the time because they want to take those away, it seems like. But I think they're beautiful and they provide a ton of shade. So yeah, I just a little tidbit on that, on just what that conversation might be with in terms of water usage.
Very important topic, and it's something we'll have to cover. I had one follow-up question before we move on to the next item, Kelly. Is there a possibility to advocate for, we're talking about cost structures, the possibility to advocate at the legislature for tax credits as it relates to cool roofing or as it relates to tree planting and things like that?
Council or Chair, are you asking me if this committee is allowed to do that?
Yes. Or would that be an ALC opportunity?
I don't know the answer to that. I will have to circle back with you. I will have to ask. I know MAG specifically does not lobby, but I don't think that precludes our membership to do so. It obviously does not preclude our membership to do so. So I'll have to ask our leadership for some more information before I give you an answer one way or the other.
Yeah, let's talk about it offline and maybe we'll bring it back if it's an opportunity. It's probably more than ALC then. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions for Anna, for the committee?
Mark, if I could I just respond quickly to what Joel had mentioned earlier?
Of course.
I just wanted to share that something that we've identified with some of the city partners that we do work with is kind of looking at an assessment around if we can achieve these tree canopy goals in these heat vulnerable neighborhoods, what will the water implications be, and what's the extent to which green stormwater infrastructure can help us not use our precious water resources to be supporting those trees, and certainly the use of desert adapted trees. But we are planning to do an assessment there so that we can really help our city partners make a strong case for investing in this, because the top question we do get is around water. And so really having a solid answer, I think right now my answer is like, let's use desert adapted trees and green stormwater infrastructure, but being able to have some data to back that up to say, no, look, we've actually assessed this and we can do this without, hopefully that's what the assessment will find. We will see. But I just wanted to share that that's coming soon. And it's something that Certainly, if any of all of you would, like to work with us on that or give your input, we'll probably have some kind of advisory committee again to guide that work. But it is something that I think will be critical for cities to be able to make the case to invest. And so that's one area we see that we might be able to be helpful.
Anna, I'm going to just butt in real quick, just a quick comment that there is an offset to energy costs as well. We're looking at increased water costs possibly, but energy savings in the environment is huge. So thank you.
Great. Well, fantastic presentation, Anna. Thank you again for that. And I think we've got a couple action items coming out of this. And our group will circle back. We need some more information. Thank you. Kelly, I don't think we're on yet. I'm sure you'll make the bold announcement to make it, but maybe we should move on to item number 5.
Unfortunately, Chair, I don't think that we're going to have quorum today. We did have RSVPs for quorum, but I think the heat and other summer activities have taken away a couple members today. So we would appreciate you to move forward with the next speaker, and the items that did need to come up for a vote will roll forward to the next meeting in September.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, number 5, presented by Amy Scanlon with New Life Center. This item is discussion. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like my presentation is up there. So thank you for that. All right. So my name is Amy Scanlon, and I'm the Outreach Director with New Life Center. And thank you so much for having me today. I am very excited to announce our new services at our new satellite location. So today we'll be talking about the services at the Sunshine Healing Center. And let's see if I can change the... Looks like I don't have control to change, so we go to the next slide. Okay, so in context to New Life Center, you may know that in the West Valley, we've been a prominent domestic violence shelter for about 3 decades. And the mission of New Life Center is helping to eliminate domestic and sexual violence through support services, education, and expertise. Our vision is creating an Arizona where all live free of domestic and sexual violence. And so again, like I said, we've been a shelter for many years in the West Valley, and we've had an outreach department, and we started serving sexual violence survivors as well as human trafficking survivors within the last 3 years, but we've been doing it out of our shelter. And so the services have been very mobile. So our team goes out and meets people in the community and tries to serve them outside of the shelter if they're not residing in our shelter for emergency services. And what I'm excited to announce is that we as an organization acquired a satellite office in Phoenix, and we now provide sexual violence healing services on a community-based operation where anyone is welcome and invited to receive services here. So I think if we look at the next slide, we have a little video, and hopefully it will run so you can take a look at our center. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of kind of understanding about how we got here and why our community needs something like the Sunshine Healing Services within Maricopa County and all throughout Arizona. So we know that that we've got a pretty strong system in our family advocacy centers, and that's great. However, if we look at these stats, we're looking at some really alarming stats that every 68 seconds, a person in the United States is sexually assaulted. The average age at the time of someone to report is about 52 years old. Offenders of sexual assault are usually known to the victim. And of 1,000 sexual assaults, about 310 are reported to police, which means 2 out of 3 sexual assaults go unreported. It's normal for victims to experience trauma well after the event occurred. And we know that more than 90% of people who are commercially sexually exploited have been sexually abused in the past. Oh, it looks like, do I have a question again or already from Wally?
Oh, no, thank you. It was from the last presentation. I'll take my hand down and I'll talk about
okay.
I'll talk at the end. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Excuse me.
So when we look at these stats, if we know that 2 out of 3 sexual assaults go unreported, that means we have victims and survivors and people in our community that aren't accessing services through our traditional route of going either to police or to a hospital-based program and getting an entry into services through that pathway. And so what this center allows is for anybody at any point in their lifespan to come and contact our advocates, contact our therapists, come to our center and receive very individualized services. And I think one of the things that, I think if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how we define sexual assault. And so we use the phrase sexual violence, and it's any sexual activity that occurs without the consent of everyone involved. So this can include sexual activities involving physical contact, non-physical contact. So sometimes that's maybe for photography, it could be online, sexual harassment, sexual coercion, and sexual trafficking. So you probably have seen the phrase, rape crisis center, which is essentially what we are, but we are so much more than that in terms of language. We want to make sure that we aren't limiting folks who maybe did not experience a rape. They experienced a different form of sexual violence that's not defined as a rape, or it's not a crisis in that it happened maybe many, many years ago, and they're just now ready to tell or feel safe enough to tell. And on that previous stat, we looked at the average person discloses for the first time at around the age of 52. So if we have someone who's able and willing and wants to start talking about their sexual violence at 52, that may not feel like a crisis to them. So we want to expand the idea of being a rape crisis center to a sexual violence healing center. So we can serve people who have been sexually assaulted acutely. So maybe it happened 6 hours ago, or it could have happened 60 years ago. At any point in their lifespan, we can provide services. In our center, we serve primary and secondary victims of sexual violence over the age 18. So those are really the 2 criteria. If you've experienced sexual violence, or if someone you know or loved experienced sexual violence and you're over the age of 18, you qualify for services here. Some of the people that we have are parents of children who've been harmed, and so we provide that secondary support to them. We don't serve minors, but we can serve the people who are caring for the minors. Survivors can receive services really without any there's no contingency upon, like, again, when did it occur? How recent did it occur? How far along did it occur? Or there's no connection to law enforcement. So you don't have to have an open case. You don't have to have reported to law enforcement. If that's something somebody wants to do, then we can help facilitate the reporting, but there's no criteria whatsoever that they would need to report unless we're talking about a mandated reporting situation. All services are voluntary. They can start at any time and they can end at any time. And again, it's at any point during someone's lifespan, and people can come back. So if they've done some treatment and they feel like life's going okay, but if they're re-triggered 3 years later, they're more than welcome and eligible to receive services again, as many times as they need it during their course of their life. So if we can look at the next slide. The programs that we have here out of our center are the sexual violence healing services. So that's advocacy, case management, our 24/7 hotline, where an advocate is available for emotional support. We've got our therapy services out of here. La Frontera provides our therapy for all of our survivors. And our human trafficking program is also out of here. So we've got case managers and a project coordinator who provide services and work really closely with our community partners and task force on providing voluntary services to survivors, adult survivors of human trafficking. We've got our sexual assault investigation training program. So we have our training director is responsible for developing the curriculum and coordinating the training for all law enforcement in Arizona. So we're really lucky to have advanced training in sexual assault and sexual assault training investigations based on her program within New Life Center. And Katie's Way is our prevention program. So we recently acquired Katie's Way, which is a curriculum that helps youth learn about healthy boundaries, healthy relationships, and it's a prevention program that will be throughout the state of Arizona regarding safe relationships and healthy boundaries. We can go to the next slide. So these are the services, advocacy and case management. And again, that can be anything. It's all individually based. If someone needs help with obtaining protection orders, or if they just need emotional support and a place to come where they feel believed, supported, and protected by the community that is here, it can range from anything that somebody might need to feel better as part of their healing process. We offer groups, and groups can, they're sexual violence groups, and we also are going to have survivor-led groups throughout our human trafficking program. So survivors will facilitate the groups amongst their peers, and they will receive community and support that way. We, of course, have the trauma treatment through La Frontera. We've got really good relationships with our law enforcement partners. And if someone does want to report their assault, we can do really nice, soft handoffs to law enforcement to make sure that they feel protected throughout that process. Medical and court accompaniment. So if someone wants a SANE exam or any kind of medical follow-up as a result of worries about what happened, then we can help facilitate that. And then holistic healing options. So this is where we're working on having yoga. We're working on having acupuncture here. Tomorrow is our first yoga class. We're really excited about doing trauma-informed yoga. So any kind of holistic healing that might make someone, and we know that it looks different for everybody. Justice looks different for everybody. Healing looks different for everybody. So our goal is to just create a place where we will have options for healing and survivors can pick what works best for them. We can go to the next slide. This is our contact. So this is our actual address. And we can serve anyone in Maricopa County. We are in downtown Phoenix, but we do help with transportation as well. We have, of course, the hotline that is answered 24/7. We have also the email address, and on our website, we have a chat feature. And so for some people that maybe don't want to call and directly speak with somebody, we can either email or use that chat feature, depending on how our survivor wants to communicate with us. And I think that's the end of my presentation, if there's any questions.
So much, I mean, so important in so many ways. If there's any question?
Amy, I was going to ask if you don't mind discussing or sharing more about the services that are also available in Spanish and how that is an additional resource for the community. I know that domestic violence and sexual violence resources are often not bilingual.
Thank you for asking that. So one of our human trafficking providers is Spanish speaking, and one of our mobile advocates and sexual violence advocates is Spanish speaking. So we can provide services directly with our Spanish speaking participants. We actually have one group that is specific for Spanish speaking survivors. And for anyone who has other needs regarding language, we can also utilize any translation. But we do have Spanish speaking advocates and case managers on our staff here at New Life Center.
Councilmember Campbell.
Yes, I have a question. Can you tell me how you're funded? I know how your center here in Goodyear is funded. How are you funded?
Kind of the same way. It's a mix of government grants and funding, and we had a huge private donor come in and help us get started with this facility here on 3rd Street. And so between our grant funding through DES and Maricopa County and through our private funder, we were able to start this program.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to see this type of satellite location open, because here in the Southwest Valley, we have for the children, and we did not have for the 18 and older. So thank you so much. This is, I'm anxious to get this information out to our communities.
Great. And if there's anything else you need us to do, or places like we can do outreach, we can do anything to spread the word for our community, because we know that there's people that are looking for services and looking for this type of support and healing. So we just want to make sure that they know that we exist.
Okay, I'm sure you already do this, but do you put this information on Facebook?
We are on Facebook, yes.
Perfect. That's a good start. Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Much.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the group? Well, thank you, Amy, so much for
Thank you.
Presentation, and this awareness is important for all of us to have, and we wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day, you guys.
Bye-bye.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question from not this presentation, but the Nature Conservancy, I just would like Kelly to be sure she sends out to us a contact information for Anna, so that we have additional questions. We'll know how to call her or send her an email. And frankly, the same thing for the Sunshine Health Service presentation. If we think of other things we need to discuss, how to get a hold of Amy. Okay.
Councilmember Campbell, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that.
Great. I think that takes us to item number 6, which is, that concludes our presentations for today. But on item number 6, are there any requests for future agenda? Anything we'd like to talk about?
This is Councilwoman Janik. May I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
Okay. 2 of our key staff members, the assistant city manager, has been attending the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. And they're studying cross-boundary collaboration on homelessness. And it's a very interesting program. We had the presentation at our city council meeting. And I asked them if they could present for MAG, and they were very willing to. So I think it's a pertinent topic. And basically what it has to do with is, when you live in a community like Scottsdale, most of the citizens, unfortunately, are averse or don't see the value in helping the homeless, especially when it comes to appropriating funds for it. So what the purpose of this meeting is to figure out what is causing those barriers, and to try to get the citizens to realize these people are part of our community. So it's very interesting and unique approach. Any interest in something like that?
Councilmember Janik, we would be happy to organize that. One of our senior members of our homeless team actually was a member of that group as well. And I know
Good.
she had a great experience with it.
Mhm. Okay. So do you want to contact me on that? And then we can work together. All right. I love that. Thank you.
Janet, great suggestion. Thank you for bringing that to us. Is there anyone else that has any ideas for our next meeting?
Councilmember, Chair, if I may, I would just like to remind the committee that not in September, but in your November meeting, we will have recommendations for you regarding the social services block grant dollars that we get from DES. We have received preliminary numbers from DES. They will go before the Human Services Technical Committee first for review. They will create their recommendations to bring up to you. So while they will not be prepared for the September meeting, they will be ready for a vote in November.
Well, thank you for the update. That's great. You know, when we started back, we talked about the homeless issue, right? And it's as we've traveled through these meetings, I've learned more and more about this, and hopefully everybody else has to elevate that conversation. I think there are best practices, and maybe this Bloomberg study will provide some more insight into that. And if there's anything else that we can look at as it relates to best practices throughout the East Valley or even in other communities nationwide that are executing against influence, and helping them get on their feet. And I know that we have a number of different challenges as it relates to housing, et cetera. But if there's anything else we can add to the agenda.
We'd be happy to do so, Chair. We have the Pathways Home program, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, our regional plan for homelessness. And while we have seen a really remarkable increase in the number of individuals who are unsheltered across our region in the last year, 2+ years, we have also seen a remarkable increase in cooperation among our municipal partners to try to address this. And the Pathways Home program really brings all that together. So perhaps that would be a good place for us to start. We could have some staff present with the progress that we've already made as a MAG regional plan to address homelessness.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think if there's no other, let's move to item number 7, which is comments from the committee. Does anybody have any announcements? I heard no. Does anybody have a yes? Okay. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our meeting today. So just a little bit over an hour. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. Motion for adjournment. Anybody like to make one in a second? And I didn't say that.
Me.
Wally Campbell. Motion for adjournment. Can I get a second?
Second, Ally.
And Vice Mayor Ally Klein. With that, we will have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you, Joel.
I see you, Kelly. Team here.